All right, guys, welcome to this class. This is the first class in this series, and we are going to be going over Photoshop. Remember that the title or the name of this course is Photoshop Immersion Program. So, whether you are learning Photoshop for graphic design or for photo editing, this is where you should be actually. You will learn how Photoshop works. I will not be teaching you graphic design deeply, neither will I be teaching you photo editing as a deep journey, so to say. But I'll be teaching you how you can use Photoshop for any of these two. So if you pay attention and you follow everything that I'll be showing you, then and if you are creative enough, you should be able at the end of this course to do basic designs in Photoshop. Do basic designs in Photoshop, do basic photo editing. Cool stuff, actually, not just basic, cool, presentable stuff, functional designs, functional photo editing, um, with the things I will teach you. So I'm going to show you how the interface works, um, what tools you need, when do you need them, mostly the things that you need to get started, not advanced stuff, not advanced stuff, the things that you need. There are things that you would want. There are some awesome designs that you see online that you'll be like, oh, I should be able to create this. But based on what this stage is, this is a beginner course. You will learn how the tools work, and we are going to experiment with a few things. All right. So, why are we doing Photoshop? That is the first question. I am teaching you Photoshop first because that is the tool I use. Okay. um there are tools and tools out there that people use for design, for photo editing. Some people use even mobile phones for these things, and they are fantastic at what they do. Now, the best tool for you is a tool that you learn and you master. Now, it doesn't matter how sophisticated a tool is. If you don't know how to use it, it will be like a very useless thing. So I am teaching you Photoshop because that is what I know how to use. That is what I use every single day. That is actually what I do my designs with, my photo editing with. Yes. Now, there are some other tools, like I mentioned, that people can use for design, but I will not be teaching you those stuff because I don't use them. Another thing is that Photoshop is considered the industry standard tool for design. It's just a common thing that people say. It doesn't mean, for example, if you do a good, fantastic work and send it to your client or whoever asked for it, they wouldn't say, oh, this is fine, this is very functional, but I'm not going to take it because you did not use Photoshop. So the idea of industry standard is kind of subjective, okay? But I will still be teaching Photoshop because that is what, just because that is what I use. Another thing is that Photoshop is good for image creation and manipulation. Right? Photoshop can be used to create high quality images, optimize images for the web, edit and manipulate photos. It has tools for digital painting, animation, and 3D product animation. Really, actually, the 3D part is not something that Photoshop is well optimized for. So you don't even want to try it; it will frustrate. But it has that functionality to an extent. By the time you want to do anything 3D, you need some other softwares like Cinema 4D, Blender, Adobe After Effects. Okay, but Photoshop is good for photo editing, even for graphics. Then mockups. Okay, mockups and prototypes, but let's just stay with mockups. Mockups are good because for example, there are some people who cannot engage, who cannot appreciate any design that is not well engaged, and this is what I mean. So let's go into, I think I have some mockups in here. Hold on, please. Yes, USB. And then in here, I think book covers. So let's say I do a book cover design. Hold on, please. Let's say I do a book cover design and I want to send it out. Usually, what the design, what design you have is always the flat design. But by the time you put it in a mock-up like this is what they call mock-up. It's like you presenting your design in such a way that it looks like the real life application of it. If I had sent this design with just a flat image, it will be flat and it will not look like a book. But sending this out makes the owner appreciate it better, even though this is not what they will eventually print. Okay, so mockups. You can't do mockups with some other softwares, even though you can go online and create your mockups, but Photoshop lets you do it. For example, now if you do a roll-up banner design, you can put it on a roll-up banner mockup as though it is already printed and you are sending the owner a picture of that thing. They will see it the way it will look in real life. Okay, if you design, let's say, a shirt for somebody, a t-shirt for somebody, there are shirt mock-ups that you present it in a way that that design, maybe it's just a text you write, will be on the shirt. It will have the shadows, it will look, if the cloth is rumpled, the design will look rumpled on it. If it's smooth, if it has some shadow, all of those things will look like the real life representation of it. And it is way easy to do mock-ups on Photoshop than wherever it is. It's not even available on CorelDRAW. I don't know. I don't think so. Okay. And I use CorelDRAW every once in a while. Okay. And then another reason I'm teaching you Photoshop is that it is integrated with other Adobe softwares. So Adobe, like I mentioned in the intro videos, if you have watched it, Adobe has a lot of softwares and they are kind of linked. Now you can use Photoshop with After Effects, with Premiere Pro, with Adobe Illustrator to create projects. So when you're working on motion design, you may sometimes even need your Photoshop file. When you're working on video editing, like I do, sometimes I create video editing, I edit videos or create motion graphics with my design from Photoshop. So sometimes if I will have a design, for example, there's a brand I design for, and every once in a while they say they need the design animated. So even though it's a flat image, it looks like a flat image. I'm opening this file so that I can show you some stuff. I can animate some of them. Now if I want to animate on After Effects, it is easy for me to export a Photoshop design as a PSD file in its raw format and import it into After Effects and edit every single layer of it. So for example, this design, I can animate this leaves, the leaves at the corner to move around as though there is a wind blowing over them. I can bring this cup in a motion and then make this blur effect around it as if motion blur, the way it's moving, animate that. I can make the text type on the screen. I can make this love this like button um rotate in 3D dimension, something like that. Okay, so if you want to do stuff like that, it will be good to have done your design in Photoshop. You just import it. Everything that you see here is a layer that can be hidden or revealed. Okay, so when you do stuff like that, it lets you have control when you get to After Effects, because you are using the tools from the same company and they are linked. There's something called dynamic link. So that is one other reason for which you should consider using Photoshop. Okay, now let's move on. Installing Photoshop. The installation of Photoshop, I have sent some links to the group, and I believe that a number of people have installed them. But based on the poll that we run or that we ran, some people said they have challenges installing them. So you can actually get Photoshop from Photoshop website, and the address is Adobe dot I mean no Photoshop.adobe.com, Photoshop.adobe.com. You will get a trial version of Photoshop here. The trial period is for 7 days, but 7 days will be enough for this training because this training actually runs for 5 days. So in that period, you just click here. Now look at this. This is $24 per month. Of course, there are some sources where you can get Photoshop for free that you may have to crack and all of that, but the legal way to get Photoshop is from Photoshop website. It costs $25 a month, and it has a trial period of 7 days. So if you just follow this free trial link, it will bring you here. You select this Photoshop, and then you go on down here, continue until you finish your subscription. Okay, so that's one way to install Photoshop, but there are other means of getting Photoshop that um, it's supposed to be discouraged. Okay, if there's any need for me to guide you through, I'm going to make a video on installing Photoshop on your laptop. Then that's where this part of this ends. So I've told you why we need Photoshop, or why I'm teaching you Photoshop, and then how to install Photoshop. You can get it from Adobe website, or you can get it from other sources that are not so legal. I don't want to encourage that. Okay. Uh Now let's get into the training proper. Uh Photoshop basics and ecosystem. Photoshop basics and ecosystem. Now, as a designer, I started out designing with CorelDRAW. However, in 2019, I met someone who was designing amazing stuff, and I asked him to teach me. Then he said he was into he was using Photoshop, so there was no way he could have taught me using CorelDRAW that I was using. He showed me some things around, and then I googled my way around some other stuff, watched a few tutorials. My learning curve was funny. It was chaotic because I was learning big things when I should be learning the small things. And it's one of the reasons that I decided to hold this training, because I believe that if I had someone to actually guide me through the process, that I wasn't just learning on my own, the learning curve could have been smoother, and I could have had a better experience learning it. So I started learning Photoshop, and I curated a number of designs I did. The earliest designs I did with Photoshop. This happened to be the first flyer I ever made on Photoshop. Looking at it now, I am just laughing because a lot of things can be better on this flyer. And I think this is the first flyer I did on Photoshop. Now, even though I started designing way early in life, I think I was in SS1 or SS2 when I started learning Photoshop. But I wasn't that good. I wasn't exactly good, even though my I still had clients and I was making some money, right? But I wasn't exactly good. So at the time I did this design, I still knew about design. It's just that I was new to Photoshop. Okay. So this is about the best thing I could have thought of. And then based on my knowledge of the tool, how much I could use the tool, this is how far I could go back then. Looking at this design, I'm just laughing at myself. Right? This is funny. Okay, but this was the first design I ever did on Photoshop. And this happens to be the first photo manipulation I did. Of course, I followed the tutorial, and then I put the fish in the water. I mean, in the body of water, and then put everything inside this bulb. This smaller fish is supposed to be a bait for the bigger fish, but look at the hook. The hook is coming out of the fish. This is funny to me. Okay, and I try to make it realistic and all of that, but this is the first ever photo manipulation I did. Funny thing with Photoshop is that if you know how to do photo manipulations very well, your design journey will be way smoother. But photo manipulation is like learning photo manipulation at start, usually, especially for beginners, is like climbing a tree from the top. Okay, so that's the first photo manipulation I ever did, and I did a number of photo manipulations shortly afterwards. I think I did this one too in 20. I think this was done in 2020. Yes, I can't even remember what I was trying to achieve back then, but breaking the head into two and putting cracks all over this one and turning this text like this and all of that. It felt like a lot then. We're looking at it now as well. Some things could be better. I think I tried to make this left side uh was cool and this right side warm. But that's just me showing you what I started doing with Photoshop when I started learning. Okay. So Photoshop was the interface was strange to me, and it threw me off actually, because I was coming from uh many years with CorelDRAW and then having to port, and that time there was even a demand on me to create some designs and all of that, so I had to be learning on the job. It helped me to an extent, but it could have been easier. Actually, I like soft life. Okay, I like soft life, and I think it could have been easier for me to actually learn with guidance. Okay, did I close that file? All right, so give me a moment. So Photoshop interface, and we will get started shortly when this loads. Okay, it's loading. Photoshop interface. Now, having installed Photoshop, when you open your Photoshop, this is what you are likely going to find. It's going to be like this. However, this part where we have recent, these are the recent files that I worked with. Now, if you're opening your Photoshop for the first time, you shouldn't expect to see these recent files, right? You should not expect to see them because, I mean, you haven't opened anything before. So this side of the screen will be blank, but it will have some stuff, maybe links to tutorials or some Photoshop marketing. Okay, so that's what you see. You see this new, open, and then home. Okay, and then what you want to do is to open a new file, to create a new file. Let me see if this has opened so that I can stay on course. Or still loading, still loading. Okay, right? So you want to open a new file, you click on this button, this one that has new file here. You click on it and then it brings this interface to you. Now, do not get confused. Usually, if you are calm enough to follow through the process explains itself. Each interface that you see will explain itself to you. Okay, so what you want to do now is to decide your screen size, your artboard size rather. What you want to do, you are like an artist, and you are like an artist who has been given a blank canvas. You need to decide what size your artwork will be like. So here we are making decisions based on what we need. First, you can name your file already. So let's say we are creating Instagram flyer. Now, sizes can be funny, but Google is always going to be your friend, so you can always go on Google to check the size. Instagram has a number of dimensions. There is a square, there is a portrait size, there is the landscape size. Okay, so you want to be sure what you want. This decision is based on you or whoever you are working with or working for. Okay, so let's say we want to do graphic design. It is portrait on Instagram is actually 1080 by 1350. I'm going to explain. Okay, if you look at this left hand side, on top we have recent, saved, photo, print, art and illustration, web, mobile, and then film and video. These are dimensions that are available: photo, print, illustration and art, web, mobile, film and video. These are presets that are already available in terms of size, but many times you don't get what you want. For example, under print, you can get A4, you can get A5, A6, A3. Okay, but let's say you want to design for Instagram, you may not get what you want, so you can always go to Google and check. For example, I'm going to just search now Instagram flyer size, press enter, and then it brings you here. It says the recommended sizes for Instagram flyers are 1080 by 1080 pixels for square images, 1080 by 1350 pixels for portrait images, and then 1080 by 560 pixels for landscape images. So if you are doing square, you use 1080 by 1080 or whatever other square dimension. Usually I would encourage you to use even higher dimension, but you get there. So if it's square, you can say 3000 by 3000. The reason for that is that when you design bigger images and compress it on Instagram, you have even higher quality on your work, but you will get there, don't worry. Okay, but what I want us to do now is to do 1080 by 1350 for portrait. So we come back to Photoshop, and then on this side of the screen you will enter your dimension. So we have named the file Instagram flyer, then width 1080, height 1350, that is 1350. Okay, as a designer, when somebody says I want this design in 1080 by 1350, what they are telling you, the first uh unit or the first length they talk about is for the width. The second figure they mention is for the height. So if somebody say I need 4 by 5, the 4 is width, the height is 5. Always keep that at your mind. The first thing you say is the width, the second one is the height. Now on Photoshop, we measure in pixels. This will sound complex to you. I expect it to sound complex unless you are already a designer. Okay, we measure in pixels. So for example, if you check this 1080 by 1080, 1080 by 1350, there will be 1080 pixels. Pixels are like square boxes, they are very tiny. So they will be on the width side, there will be 1080 of it. On the height, there will be 1350 of it. So we have 1350 pixels on the height, then 1080 pixels on the width. That's what it means. Now the units, there can be more. If you click on this drop down arrow, you will see pixels, you will see inches, centimeters, millimeters, points, picas. Okay, but remember I said I'll be teaching you essentially what you need, not just anything, so that you don't get confused and lost. So just stick to pixels for now. By the time you need to know how to use inches and centimeters, you won't even have to stress, because that time you understand the system. I'm a systems person. Now once there is a system in place, you are unlikely to get lost. Now if you understand the system, you know how it works, you can manipulate it. Like they say, you learn the rules before you start breaking them. If you don't learn the rules, how are you going to successfully break them without getting yourself in trouble? Okay, so stay with pixels, and you are going to know why very shortly. Because Photoshop is pixels based, it's a raster based design tool. Okay, so right here we have entered 1080 pixels. Please follow my mouse. We have entered 1350 pixels on the height. Then automatically it's a portrait image. We can switch it by clicking this icon. If I click on this second icon that looks wider but shorter, the 1080 here, the 1080 on top will come down here, and the 1350 down here will go up. Let's experiment. So I click here. You see now it is now 1350 by 1080. If I click the second one, it becomes 1080 by 1350. All right, now one other thing I want you to do is to click on this checkbox, this one that has artboards on it, and I'm going to tell you why very shortly. So click on it. We mark it as we want it to have artboards. All right, now once we check on that, every other thing here, color mode, always leave it on RGB. RGB stands for red, green and blue. Red, green and blue, those three colors are the colors that are combined to get almost any color that you see on your screen, on your phone, on your laptop, on your TV. RGB is the color combination that they use to get those colors. All right, so it just combines them in different form. The computers combine them, so always leave it at RGB. One funny thing is that once you check this artboards, you can actually not change this thing from RGB. However, if you don't check it, if you remove it, if you uncheck it rather, you will be able to select other color modes. So we can have CMYK, you can have lab color, RGB, grayscale, bitmap. But once you check here, the only option available to you is RGB. Okay, Later in your design journey, you will learn the difference between RGB and CMYK and how they affect print, but we don't need that for now. Okay, so I don't want to tell you too many things because I know them. I want to tell you the things that you know you need to know to get started without stress. Now, your background content should be white. There are more options: black, background color, transparent, and custom. Leave it as white. Okay, and then the other parts down here, just leave them on tampered with, and then create. So you click on this button, create, and then what we have now, do not forget, before I click this create, I asked you to check this artboard that I was going to tell you why. I have shown you one of the reasons here. Once you check it, your RGB remains locked. That is the only option you have, but there's even more reasons to check that box, and I will show you now. So I'll click on create, and then we have this file. So we have this whiteboard. Everything here that you have right now is an empty slate, empty artboard, empty canvas for you to design on. So everything you want to put on this thing, you have to put it layer by layer, one step after the other. Now, before we continue, I want to show you why I said you should check that box. Look at this screen very well. On top here, please follow my mouse. On top here, we have the name of this artboard. It says artboard 1. Okay, so that means we can have more artboards. If I click on this name, remember I'm clicking on the name out here. Once I click on it, it is also active in this place. Okay, click on it out here. Here it will put a shade around the name. Please watch very closely. I'm going to click out like this so that nothing is selected. Now I'll come out here and click this artboard 1. Then you watch what will happen to this artboard 1 name here on this panel. This is the layers panel, and I'm going to teach you about the layers panel. I don't want to be ahead of myself, and this thing has not loaded. I want to be sure that we are on track. Okay, so I'll click on the name here, and then it selects the name on the layers panel here, so it is active. Whatever you want to do on this artboard now will affect this just one artboard. I can expand it to make it longer. I can reduce it to make it shorter. I will just undo twice because of those two actions. 1, 2. It returns to what it was. Now, if you can see on your screen clearly, you see that there is a plus mark or icon on top here. Then there is a plus here, another plus here, and then another plus at the bottom. So once you click on any of those pluses or the plus sign, it means that the computer or Photoshop is going to create another artboard to that side in the same dimension as the existing one. Okay, so I'm going to experiment with that. We click the plus to the right, it adds one artboard to the right. Let's select artboard 1 again. We click the one to the left, it adds another one. Then let's select artboard 1 again. Now look at it, there's no more box to the right and to the left. I mean, there's no more plus sign, this one. We don't have it to the left again, we don't have it to the right. That is because we already created 2 artboards, one to the right, one to the left. So there's no point trying to create another one again. Imagine you're trying to create another artboard the size of this one in this small empty space. It doesn't make sense. So the computer will deactivate the plus icon here, and then that functionality will not be available for that time. Notice, however, if I delete artboard 3 again, the plus sign will start to show. Can you see? We now have artboard 1 selected, and then to the left we have that plus sign showing because there's no artboard on that side. So if I click on that plus, we have an artboard to that side. Select the name, click on this plus, we have one artboard here. Select artboard 1 again. I'm selecting by clicking on that name, so you click on the name. Then we have another plus at the bottom. If you click on it, then we have it down here. So we have 5 artboards on the screen, and what I want to do now is to delete them. Okay, But before I delete them, let's go back to create another new file, and then we try to do what we just did with this plus sign, and then something different will happen. So we go back to new, come to file, to new, and then the last creation we did was this 1080 by 1350, then 300 pixels per inch. I don't think I explained this one. Always leave it at 300, is a high resolution. Probably I will explain it very soon or later in this course. So the last setting is still there, okay, and right here is the custom, is the first one. That is the last thing we set. So I will uncheck this artboard, this checkbox. If I uncheck it before I create, I'm going to click on create now, and then this is what we have. Notice, first thing first is that unlike the previous one, this one, please follow my mouse. Unlike this one where we have the plus sign, let me just delete the other artboards 5, 4, 3 and 2. I'll delete them, select all of them, and then press delete. So unlike this one where we have the plus sign, when you get to the other one, first, the name is not, it doesn't have that artboard one name on it. So it means that we are not using an artboard, it's just a pure canvas. Okay, now there's no plus sign, I can't even select it. It just came with a background that is white, and that's all. So I can't add another artboard here, I can't add another artboard here, I can't add another one on top and below. Now, for example, if you have to create multiple designs for the same brand right now, you can't do that on this design because there's no artboard to your left. There's no another artboard. You can only have one artboard. Okay, so that is why using an artboard is very important. It is very important. So let's move on. So I'll close this and go back to the previous file.